There we go. Looks like it's on. I'm not a Jew. All right. If you're watching, can you please comment and let me know if you can hear me? Yeah, I have a cold. It's not really sore. I'm kind of thirsty. I'm not saying anything, that's why I sound quiet. So, for those of you who are watching, this is a test. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've been getting the help from Ivan the Heathen, and looks like we've got it to work. Oh, and I'm already getting questions. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to really be doing questions tonight, Mr. Gillingham. That's a good question. Okay, so the... You've only watched 80% of my videos. Why are you skipping the 20%? That's probably the most important part. Oh yeah, let's see who commenting has watched the most videos. They win a prize. Okay. You're supposed to give me money if you watch my videos, not the other way around. Jesus. But as soon as it's live, you comment. It's so interesting. Alright guys, I'm sorry if I'm not saying very much. It's just this is mostly a test. I've seen how this works, getting a feel for it. This I guess will be the first successful live streaming event. I have a couple ideas on what I like to do. I want to talk to some people. So Ivan the Heathen, who helped me set this up, I'm going to at least do a couple conversations with him. I don't think there'll be debates. He and I have talked a couple times, known each other for years. A couple weeks ago we video chatted, and that was pretty interesting. And I think a lot of people would have liked to have been in on that conversation. So we'll probably replay it at some point. And if I haven't said so already, there's a long lag between when I read a comment and when it appears in the live stream. You know, I'm so spoiled by capitalism that I assume that it should be in real time all the time, and it's not. There's about a 20 or 30-second delay between what my camera picks up and records and when it shows up on YouTube. Although I think I'm seeing the comments pretty much in real time. Hey, Holistic John. No plans to release audio. People ask that a lot. I'd have to learn how to podcast. So that's very unlikely. You should be able to just listen to audio through YouTube though, right? Just, I don't know, put on your headphones. I mean, I listen to YouTube in the car all the time. Yeah, and I'm sorry this has taken so long. I'm really a consumerist when it comes to technology. I don't know how it works really. I use a laptop and a phone, but I'm not a programmer. I'm not that skilled in setting things up, and basically I waited for the weekend until I could bother Ivan the Heathen a little bit less self-consciously to help me out, which he did. He's not an expert, I don't think, but he's smart enough about this to know how to figure it out, whereas I am not. What fiction do I read other than Ayn Rand? I don't really read Ayn Rand. The only Ayn Rand that I've read wasn't fiction. I have Atlas Shrugged, and I read a few pages and that was it. I read very little fiction, but I've read some famous fantasy works. I was a big fan of Lord of the Rings and related writings like The Silmarillion and The Hobbit, and even some of the stuff his son published, like The Children of Hurin. Obviously Dune, a couple others, but really currently there's one book that takes huge precedence over all the others, and that's Game of Thrones, or Song of Ice and Fire. I'm a huge fan of those books. I read them a couple of years ago, and I've been consuming the all the media that's kind of flowered around them, which itself is pretty interesting. Do 12 people watching. See how high we can get this tonight. I don't got anything else going on. I discovered something. This is probably too much information. Yeah, I'm not going to say this. There's a reason my throat is sore, and it's not because I have a cold. Oh. Hello. Everyone's coming out. If you're just tuning in, this is just a test. I'm going to do some live streaming in the future and some Google Hangouts. But I've never really done that before, so I'm running this tonight. Pretty informal, not really any structure to this. And make a Goodreads that we can see what you read. I mean, I've made videos about what you should read, and often if I think a book is good, I just make a video about it. So, I don't know. Oh shit. So sorry if I'm not very talkative. I'm not used to this. Usually when I do a video, I know exactly what I want to say. I don't script them. I don't write it down ever, really. There was one time I wrote down what I wanted to say verbatim years ago, and although that was an interesting episode and I think that was a good video, I just have never taken the time to do it again. But so this is a little bit different for me. I was just turning this on just to see what would happen, and I didn't really have a topic to discuss. No, I've not read Reisman. I haven't read any of his stuff other than a few essays he wrote in a book called The Pursuit of Justice, which is an excellent book. A very, very cogent critique of the current political system, legal system. But I have not read any of his actual books. And in terms of comparing ANCAPs and alt-right people, I don't think that they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I think there's a lot of overlap, but obviously there's differences, different axes of ideological axes. I'm not a Trump supporter. I am a Hillary hater, though. I support him to the extent that he humiliates and harms Hillary, which he's been very disappointing in that regard. Yeah, and this is actually something that it's hard not to talk about. I haven't talked about the election that much, if at all, in my videos. It's amazing the amount of documented corruption that we are getting from WikiLeaks and from other reporters. But what's even more amazing, really, is uh, the degree to which people who support Hillary just are completely oblivious and inoculated to any kind of critique. And whenever I've talked to Hillary supporters, I always ask, and this is explicitly not a rhetorical question, what would she have to do for you to not support her? And I've never gotten an answer. No one has ever said, well, if she did this and this, it would be too far, it would be too much. And the fact that pretty much anything Trump does automatically disqualifies him, and nothing he could do would qualify him, the double standard is very rank and obvious. Now, I'm not a Trump supporter. I don't like Trump. I think he's failing as a presidential candidate, both as how high I'd like him to be and how he could be to win. But I think it shows the degree of not just partisanship, but identity politics, where people, good politicians, are vessels of the hopes and dreams of their constituents. And people, they have suitably vague rhetoric and ideas that people just impute whatever they want to hear. And I think the most obvious and maybe best example of this is Obama's campaign slogan of change. Change could mean anything. So if you wanted change, you could just imagine that he was going to do it, whatever it was that you thought, regardless of what his actual policy positions were. Now, Hillary Clinton's not very good at that, but people still impute all kinds of positive emotional things to her. And I have to deal with it all the time. I don't follow the election that closely. I'm not getting into political debates. Most of the people that I interact with publicly are Trump supporters. Trump's fairly popular in New Hampshire and in the areas where I go, like my gym. But, in the gay dating scene, Hillary is wildly popular, and many times I have to deal with just guys who are obsessed with her greatness and who can't help but bring her up. And this is not in a response to me bringing up politics. I don't bring politics up when I'm talking to guys initially, but many times I've had people just volunteer on their own their adoration for her. And oh, let's see. Sorry, I'm getting a message from my tech support. Sorry, talking with Ivan. But no, it's pretty disgusting. Yes, I'll do a video on World War I and World War II books. One reason I haven't done that is because my library is split between two states right now. I have about half my library in Michigan and the other half in New Hampshire. And most of the ones in Michigan are books that I've read, but there would be a lot of books there that are about World War I and World War II that I don't want to forget about them, and B, I like to have them as physical props. So that could be some time away. Are you starting to notice the left has no principles? The left has no concrete policy principles. They have no, or very few. They have emotional impulses, and anything that they can be told is going to go on the trajectory of those impulses, they will go for. And that means that they can favor contradictory things. So they can, if they're told that Hillary Clinton will help women by whoever she appoints to the Supreme Court, then they'll be okay with that. But if they're also told she'll help women by bombing Syria, they'll go with that as well. And apologies for the pauses. I'm reading comments and there's a delay. It's kind of awkward, and I don't mind going through an awkward phase here because I do want to do this in the future, and part of that is getting through this. Yeah, I don't I mean, people who are donating money to Hillary Clinton, who are actively posting about Hillary Clinton, they've bought in. I really do believe that once you start doing that, your ego gets tied in with the candidate, and that's ingenious. I don't know to what extent candidates are purposely doing that. I think it's just built into the system to a point. But you have people, if you've been making Facebook posts arguing with people for months and months and months, no one is willing to just, not no one, but very few people are then going to say, in light of what we've learned from WikiLeaks or whatever else, I'm going to change my mind. So it's crazy. And I guess there's a little bit, a lot of people on my Facebook feed, and I have a lot of, obviously, the libertarian echo chamber on my Facebook feed, but I have plenty of people who are not libertarians, people who I went to high school with, people I went to college with, the gaggle of gay guys that I've accumulated over the years, most of whom, I have a disproportionate number of gay libertarian friends on Facebook, but I have plenty who are not. And it was fascinating to watch over the course of the primary season. A lot of those guys were Bernie supporters, and they were posting these things about Hillary being a Hillary Clinton being a criminal, an overt criminal, and all these. Many of the critiques were justified, and a lot of them were also hyperbolic. But then, the minute Bernie Sanders supported her, all of them basically posted explicit pronouncements that they supported her. If Bernie supports her, then they support her. And I've seen one of them, since it's come out that Bernie was bribed, basically, and had his arm twisted, kind of recant on that a little bit and start posting some of the more recent exposés on Hillary Clinton's corruption. But I don't think that's going to be a major thing. I think that they've resigned themselves to the lesser of two evils, and yep, Ivan's bringing up the James O'Keefe videos, which I've watched. Apparently there's one more that's coming out, and the details, apparently the most shady black hat criminal, like literally gone to prison criminal guy on that list, has been to the White House 300 times or something. It came out to once a week since Obama's been in office. And Ted Cruz has actually mentioned it and said that there should be criminal investigations. So there is some traction here, but I think that the supporters of the Democrats are basically inoculated to that, because every criticism is a Republican slander. Every criticism is partisan. And there's a grain of truth to that. I think a lot of the criticism is partisan. But that doesn't mean that the criticisms aren't actually based on reality also. But they have the perfect color. They can always just say, well, of course Ted Cruz is saying bad things about Hillary. She's going to win the presidency, and they're going to have sour grapes about it, and that's the only reason. I don't know who's going to win. It's bad either way. I've been kind of trying to look for the silver lining in either case. My gut feeling is that Hillary's going to win, by hook or by crook, probably by both. But then I think the silver lining is that there'll be enormous opposition to her, and hopefully she would be plagued by scandals and prosecutions, and hopefully an impeachment. I want to see her. Honestly, I despise that woman and have since I was a little boy. Honestly, my political awareness can be traced to the Clinton presidency and some of their more overt tyrannical criminality, which her culpability in is less than her husband's, but they were definitely a team. She takes credit for all of that now, and I don't think without some justification. So it's fascinating. The stuff that they do, it can have ripple effects many years down the line. So, who's to say I would have become a libertarian had it not been for some of the egregious outrages committed by the first Clinton administration. But now in my case, the one that really affected me the most was what happened in Waco, but there's a whole slew: Vince Foster, Oklahoma City, Kosovo. Um, it's just, and it's funny. It's all coming back. Um, my roommate was saying that he had heard that when Bill Clinton was getting into a sex scandal, and the his I think it was Jennifer Flowers or whoever was getting interviewed in Congress, that he launched a cruise missile attack against Afghanistan and Khartoum and Sudan, and it is now known that this was blatantly just to get media attention away from his sex scandal. We're talking about like literally blowing up hundreds of people to shift the media attention away from you for a day or two. And it's funny that Donald Trump can be a monster for um, what he said about, I don't even know, locker room talk, but then Bill and Hillary can vaporize basically uh, hundreds of people, and I actually remember that. I remember watching that on the TV when it happened. Am I aware of race realism? Yes, I have a video entitled "The Political Implications of Race Realism" if you'd like to watch it. Um, the an obvious CTR show. Who's CTR? I predict James O'Keefe will die in a car accident where he'll be shot in the back of the head 5 times. I mean, that seems to be what happens to everyone who comes out. It is terrifying to think that a person this power hungry and rapacious and blatantly corrupt and murderous will be in the most powerful position in the world. And not only like politically powerful, physically powerful, but to be clothed in the cloak of legitimacy and authority. That is truly terrifying. And and that's really terrifying if that happens to anybody. Like even if I or some humble beneficent person was to be cloaked in that power, it would be terrifying. It's a terrifying uh, institution in reality, and that we know it's going to be going to a megalomaniac. You were in the Navy for 6 years? Jesus. But you have some stories. I like Milo, except he is pro-circumcision, which I cannot understand. Uh, I think he's very intelligent. I think he's very. I don't like the whole Trump daddy thing, but I don't know how much of that's sincere and how much of that is just trolling. I think it's good what he's doing with free speech on campus. I think we're finally seeing a good First Amendment pro-free speech pushback, and that's something that we need. Trump said pussy. uh, so, uh, it's also a little bit personal. I think that there's going to be a shift. This is kind of a side topic. I don't know how many of you would care about this. I do think that uh, the the identity politics of the gay community are going to splinter considerably. What with Orlando and with Trump and people like Milo, and the fact that the left is basically removing the preferred status that they've placed on homosexuals all these years. So we could see that will change. Now, I don't think that's going to make a big difference in the long run, but it's definitely something that's going to change. Pink Pistols had like a quintupling of their membership after the Orlando shooting. I prefer the pronoun Z, Xiee. That's how you can refer to me. Yeah, you have to be a real sleuth to know my real name. What's your opinion on the elite's control over the media, education, foreign policy? The way you word that question, it's like a tautology. Whoever is in control of those things is, like, by definition, elite, whatever their political motives or long-term agenda. If we're talking about a uniform, shady cabal in control of everything, I don't really believe in that anymore. I used to for a long time. However, there can be commonalities of interests. There can be an incentive for people in power to have similar interests. They can come from similar backgrounds. They can have similar ideologies, religious views, political views, and this can appear like overt institutional organization when it's not necessarily. Hard to tell, though. I mean, these people are very powerful people, are secretive. Sometimes they have worldviews and beliefs that are quite alien to average people. They live in a different world. Um, in my personal life, I've only kind of skimmed the meniscus of that society, and they can often basically live in bubbles, and they can be quite alien from the rest of us. But that doesn't mean that they all work together. Oh, correct the record. Yeah, in terms of the main policy difference that really stands out now is foreign policy, and especially with Russia. It just seems in the last couple of weeks uh, there's been an exponential increase in the belligerence between the United States and Russia. Uh, I don't follow Russia that closely, but the U.S. military has always wanted to put itself in a position of hegemony over every other state. And during the Cold War, this wasn't really possible. And after the Cold War, it wasn't really necessary or a good idea. But ideologically and bureaucratically, this is just the momentum that the U.S. military and the U.S. government has. And with the advent of terrorism after 9/11 as a serious, credible threat, at least it could be presented as that way. It's not an existential threat, it never was. Um, they suddenly have an excuse to do all the things that they wanted to, but didn't really have a justification for in the 90s. So there's two things that I'm aware of that are major causes of allies with Russia. One is the U.S. is placing missile systems throughout Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Romania. I think they like to place them in places like Belarus and Ukraine. I don't know that they actually will or that they have. And ostensibly, these missiles are to provide missile defense against Iran, missile defense that is not needed. They're clearly designed for operations against Russia, whether that's defensive or offensive. Uh, the Oh, see, I didn't realize that parentheses means Jews, so that shows how not alt-right I am, I guess. Um, if these missile systems, the press conference I saw Putin give, Basically, he was saying that these missile systems would give the United States first strike capability. First strike capability meaning the United States could strike against Russia and survive a retaliatory counterstrike. The balance of the Cold War was something called MAD, mutually assured destruction, where it was known that if either the United States or the Soviet Union went to war with each other, both would be destroyed, and so neither would go to war. But if ever a situation were to arise where one power would have the ability to strike first and survive the counterstroke, then war would be much more likely. And in fact, the side that was about to lose the tactical advantage would feel that it had to attack first preemptively. Putin is, according to the press conference, is basically saying that these missile systems in Eastern Europe constitute a first strike capability on the part of the United States, which would necessitate that Russia, act first as a reaction to the missiles being placed there. I don't know how much of that is bluff, but it's extremely terrifying talk. But then the other thing, and Hillary Clinton came out and said her number one policy initiative in foreign policy will be the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, because obviously overthrowing the secular dictator in Iraq proved to be such a wise decision, one that she had a very culpable hand in making possible. And for the life of me, I can't understand. I know why this is, because Assad is not a puppet, but an ally of the Russians and of the Iranians, and the Israelis don't like him, the Saudis don't like him, the Qataris and the Bahrainis and all the fundamentalist Muslims that we're aligned with and who donate tens of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. But Bashar al-Assad is not a threat to the United States. He's been in power in Syria for decades, and his father was in power in Syria for many decades before that. And at no point did this ever, or could this ever, lead to a threat to the United States, or even Israel for that matter. Israel has lots of nuclear weapons and a powerful army, and they're perfectly capable of handling any kind of existential threat to their society. So it's very perplexing why Hillary Clinton is being this bombastic and bellicose regarding Bashar al-Assad. And it's all the more ironic because the main opponents to Assad is ISIS, or ISIL. It's the most radical, most illiberal, anti-feminist, anti-gay Muslim zealots in the world. I mean, so much of the concern about Islam is hyperbole and exaggeration and fear-mongering and xenophobia, but ISIS and ISIL are literally all those exaggerated fears manifest into an actual literal thing. And yet what she's proposing is in effect becoming their ally. And what's also money, all her supporters, I've never heard any Hillary supporter say, I really want to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. I think that's the most important thing to me. None of her support, none of the people who are going to vote for her, none of the people, I don't want to say none of the people who donate to her, because many of the people who donate her probably the most money do want this, so maybe that explains it. And I question when I talk to these guys on Tinder or Grindr who want to crow about how great she is. Is she so great that it's worth risking a war with Russia? Bashar al-Assad is a Russian ally, if not a satellite, and that would mean basically fighting a proxy war or a direct war with Russia. Never mind the stuff with the missile system. So I'm actually fairly concerned. I actually literally started thinking, Jesus, am I in a place that could get nuked? I don't think that's particularly likely, but that I would even start to wonder about it is just completely crazy. It's completely crazy. And the fact that Trump says he gets along with Putin and Putin said he gets along with Trump, all other issues are, they're not even secondary, they're not even tertiary to that. That is by far the most important issue. So, and I just read it was a Reason or some antiwar.com. the WikiLeaks, they found a speech that Hillary Clinton had given to Goldman Sachs, and she clearly understands Syria fairly well. She knows that ousting Assad means aiding ISIS, means aiding the most radical Muslims, and that there isn't a good solution after, and all these other problems, and it probably means the genocide of the Christians and the Druze and the Alawites and the Kurds and anyone else, uh, any of the Sunni businessmen who have helped them, the moderate Muslims there. Uh, so why she still favors it, I don't know, and why her hordes of fucking moronic supporters are unaware of this and they clap like a pack of lemmings whenever she gives a speech. That people are into her because of her social welfare policies, her emotional wishy-washy claims of loving children and wanting to help women and not being anti-Muslim. But she's talking about vaporizing children and Muslims and helping people who kill gays by throwing them off buildings and enslaving women and write articles about bringing back the slave trade, and her supporters are just too ignorant to know it or too blind in adoration of her to react. So, yeah, I really, I think one of the most interesting things about this election, but not just this election, elections generally, is the degree to which people are blinded, are just, they they look, and it happened with Obama. It happened with Republicans too. A lot of conservatives just, they almost deified someone like George W. Bush. I mean, they would pray to him and pray for him, and some of the crazy I remember, I when I was in college, I was something of a minarchist, and I remember when I really cast that aside. I was listening to Harry Browne, the late great Harry Browne, who, God, would it be awesome if he was still alive and could have run for the Libertarian ticket this year. But he was interviewing this highly intelligent conservative guy he's head of some organization, and he was straight minarchist. This guy was against the war on drugs, against Social Security, against the welfare state, against foreign intervention, against foreign war, against income taxes, against regulations, against, this guy was straight, federal government should be 10% what it is. And he was a strong supporter of George W. Bush. And Harry Browne was like, why? George W. Bush has never even tried to do anything about those issues except to expand them and go in the opposite direction. And this is, there was a time there where the Republicans had the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency. There was a 2 or 4 year period, probably 2002 to maybe 2006, something like that. That's a clean sweep. They could have, if not passed, pushed for strongly any number of policies and reductions of regulations and reductions of taxes and whatnot, and they didn't go for any of it. And Harry Browne was like, why do you support this guy? And he was just like, well, there's a chance he could reduce Social Security a little bit. And it was like, you're a smart guy. Presumably he was articulate. He had a command of history, and he had a command of, basic economics, and had been, working in high-level policy circles for probably a couple decades. And yet he was that delusional that despite the overwhelming tsunami of counter-evidence, he thought that George W. Bush was a minarchist and that he should support him to advance minarchist causes. And people, I don't know what it is about it. If we were going to have a real debate about the merits of statism, this is one of those arguments that people don't make, but they could if they knew how to really debate, because it is a strong one. That is power, when you have millions of people who are just willing to see past all evidence, all flaws, all contradictions, all statements, explicit, implicit, everything, and just assume every possible positive thing that they could on you. And this is not unique to this campaign. It's not unique to either party. I think that in this election, it's particularly clear when you have someone like Hillary who is so blatantly avaricious, power hungry, uh, criminal, above the law, rapacious, and yet people still support her. And actually, I could understand someone who says, "Yeah, she's a criminal and she's terrible and I hate her and blah blah blah. She's not as bad as Trump, so I'm going to lesser of two evils." I think that that is wrong, but I can understand that logic. I can respect that they're doing a cost benefit analysis and maybe I don't agree with their math, but at least they're trying to solve an equation. But that's only a small fraction of the people who are supporting her. Most of the people who are supporting her, they love her and they don't care. Anything you say is conspiracy theory. It's a slander. It's partisan. And I know I have family like this. My mom is like this. She's loved Hillary Clinton since Hillary Clinton's been the first lady. And I've asked her, what would she have to do for you to say that's too much, that's going too far? And the answer is nothing. There's nothing she could do. I made a video like 4 or 5 years ago called Questions for Liberals, and I said, how many people does Barack Obama have to kill with Hellfire missiles? How many children does he have to vaporize before it doesn't justify, the fact that you get slightly better welfare, or you think that you get slightly better welfare? And granted, not lots of liberals watch that video, but I've never had anyone answer that question and be like, well, if he killed 10,000, that's too many. But if he killed 8,000, that'd still be worth it. No, they don't. They don't have an answer to that. And I ask that to everyone I get a chance to ask, and they never have an answer. They'll support her no matter what. And that's what's really scary. That's what's terrifying. What's not terrifying, I think the silver lining is the fact that the other half of the country, more or less, absolutely despises her and has despised her for many years. And this is what's different between her and Barack Obama. There's a couple differences. Barack Obama is a better politician. He's a better speaker. He can pull off the I'm not power hungry, I'm not crazy way better than Hillary Clinton can. He doesn't have the history, which is actually very interesting. I'm very curious about his history, and that's not to go into the birther thing, but the fact that he went from the state senator of Illinois to the presidency in 4 years is nothing short of astounding. I think that's clear evidence that, at least at the party level, that there is a selection process that goes on. Something that we're learning now with WikiLeaks, that they're not elections, they're selections. At least at the primary level. I think very likely at the electoral level as well. But I don't know if the evidence for that is persuasive per se, but I think it's very likely. But Hillary has been a demon that's been vilified for decades, and that's good. I'm glad. And the silver lining, assuming that there isn't a fucking mushroom cloud that destroys half the country, is that everyone will hate her. Hopefully it will degrade the office, and hopefully there'll be massive political opposition to her that will get something done. The Republicans are always best when there's a Democrat as president. Always. The Republicans are as big government, pro-welfare, pro-warfare as the Democrats are when they have a Republican in office. And there are at least some of them willing to fight. Now, yes, there's the mainstream neocon branch of the Republicans that Hillary is in lockstep with. I mean, Hillary is she's worse than John McCain. John McCain, for all of his innumerable horrible faults, is against torture. She's on the Lindsey Graham, gosh, I don't know, Lindsey Graham, her, Jesus, not even John Kerry, like George Bush, not even Dick Cheney. Like, she's at that level. She's like right in there with the devil himself, in terms of how she's a pure hawk, she's a pure corporatist, she's a pure gun controller, and that it's normally they're so. We'll see how this all plays out. You have on the one hand the people who ignore all the evidence against her, and the other people who eat it up. So it's depressing. Presidential elections are always depressing. I go to the gym and I'm trying to work out, and you know, people come and they want to talk about it, and I'm not there to do that. You're always torn between evangelism and living your life, and you know, part of you says, "Oh, you got to go and make the argument all the time," but you have to understand when that's effective and when that's not, and you're not gonna turn someone into a fucking libertarian at the showers in the locker room. At least not over one day. Um, yeah, and I mean, with guys, I don't even argue with them with Hillary, but a lot of them, when they realize that I'm not gung ho for Hillary, they immediately lose interest, and it's like, oh, you don't want her to get elected? You don't think this is the most important election ever? I'm like, yeah, it probably is, because her electing her might lead to World War III. So, all right, I have not been watching the comments here. Sorry, guys, monologuing like I normally do in my videos. Jesus. All right, there's gonna be a little pause here as I read some of this shit. Oh my God, look at these comments. This is good. Discussion is good. Just talking about the word cuck, objectivism, stuff on. I'd ask for people to give me ideas on what to talk to, but there'd be such a delay that it wouldn't work. Lengthyounarther, have you read any works by Marx? I read the Communist Manifesto a long time ago. Nothing else. I read Thomas Sowell's book about Marxism, which I understand to be pretty good. You know, I made a video a year or two ago about how the labor theory of value kind of contradicted the minimum wage, and I had a dedicated Marxist, get on there and give me a lot of shit, and actually a lot of it was justifiable. And he said, "Oh, Marxism doesn't have a labor theory of value; they have the law of value," and you know, basically he knew their terminology pretty well, and so I figured, all right, I'll take a criticism and I'll read a little bit more on it. So I bought Sowell's book on it, which I highly recommend. And Sowell, many people may not realize, was a Marxist. He went to Harvard. He was a Marxist. So he knows what he's fucking talking about when he writes a book on it. And I've read reviews of it by other Marxists who basically say he gets it right. He understands it. And the book is not he doesn't just go through and just tear it to pieces. He basically explains what it says and what it means. And then offers some very softly worded critiques at the end. Do you think that fascism may be a threat that the West and America will have to face soon? If we haven't already been facing it. You know, this election cycle, uh, a lot of libertarians who are reacting strongly against Trump, and I totally understand this. I'm not saying this reaction was unjustifiable, but we're saying that he was very fascistic, cult of personality, a go-getter. He's going to make the trains run on time. He's a successful businessman, yada, yada, yada. Jeffrey Tucker talked a lot about how in the United States, communism and socialism really just does not have purchase. It never has, and it never really will. But fascism does, and that the threat to the United States internally anyway is always from the brown shirts, not from the red shirts. And that's true. I don't think though that this is something that you could say is only true of Trump. I think that Hillary's more um, left-leaning um, rhetoric is probably cynical, and that she's more of a hawk centralist, corporatist, literally fascist. So I think, I mean, again, from my perspective, I kind of cut my teeth, and my ideological development really started with all the calls that the first Clinton administration was tyrannical and was going to bring in martial law, and was going to, that's when the what is it, Rex 83 or Rex 88 or the FEMA camps, and they were going to kill all the militias and all that stuff. And I really um, and it and that was all very disturbing in the 1990s. It was very scary for people who looked at it, and it really motivated a lot of people to get into libertarianism and to get into the militia movements. But 9/11 escalated that so far. And if you're young enough that you don't remember the pre 9/11, it is a huge watershed event. And the escalation in terms of police powers, state power, presidential executive power, military power, all of that has just exploded since then. And not just that, the the feeling that we have to have a leader who's going to run it's much worse than it was before, much worse. And but the United States has a history of this. I mean, uh, Lincoln was a tyrant, and he was probably murdered for that reason. Um, and we had very, very strong kind of fascistic rhetoric and impulses, say, in World War One. A lot of people in and around Woodrow Wilson, and including Woodrow Wilson, had very kind of fascistic ideas and notions. There are these people. There's this. Robert Higgs talks about this if you read his book, Crisis and Leviathan, and he has several excellent books, but the two that he's best known for, and deservedly so, are Crisis and Leviathan and Depression War and Cold War. And I highly recommend that everybody buy and read both of those books. He has other books that are excellent as well, but those two are masterpieces. They're so good that Murray Rothbard actually required people to read Crisis and Leviathan when he was teaching. He traces that there was a very sudden and very stark change in the ideological direction of the elites of the United States around 1900. Before 1900, you really had the civic religion of the United States was very much that of the Founding Fathers. It was the Bill of Rights, and that government is best which governs least, and government's a necessary evil. And of course, that was never a uniform feeling. It wasn't like that was a monolith and all people in America believe that. That's not true. There was always debate. You always had the Hamiltonians and the Jeffersonians and the Whigs and the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and there was a lot of debate there. But the center, the focus of that was a much more limited state. And the idea that you would have a positive state that was going around trying to reshape society, trying to make things more egalitarian, trying to fulfill some destiny within the world, and like a political destiny in the world. The idea that the United States is a city on the hill and has a special destiny is a very old idea. But originally, a lot of those ideas were, well, it's an example. People will look to the United States and they'll be inspired. And that's something that, whether it's true or not, is certainly not an objectionable goal. Right? That's not the same as we're going to spread democracy with bombs or military force. They wouldn't have had the term bombs back then. And this shift to we want a powerful state that has the ability and the desire to shape society. Uh, I'm not to say I know all the roots that go all the way where it all comes from, but it really became a powerful political force in what we all call the progressive era now. And those ideas, when they're manifested politically, are very close to, similar, or identical with fascism. And the United States has been dealing with that ever since. And there's been pushback. There was pushback after Vietnam. There was pushback after World War II. But there's a ratchet effect, and we get World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, the Cold War, and now, the post 9/11. So no, fascism is definitely a problem in the United States. It always has been. Uh, People don't always realize this. If you look at Congress, watch C-SPAN, and you'll see there's the speaker and the gavel and all the benches. In the back on the walls, there's all this iconography, and they have these. They look like pillars, but there's bundles of sticks that are wrapped with an axe at the top. That is a Roman, and that is a symbol of Roman authority, and that is actually literally a fasces, and that's where the term fascism comes from. And I think also the Lincoln Memorial, his armrests, he's sitting in a chair, are fasces. Now, that's not to say they built that stuff because of Mussolini and Hitler. Obviously, that stuff was there before Mussolini and Hitler. That stuff was inspired by the Roman period. In classical Rome, the fasces was a symbol of authority and power. The Caesars, the tribunes, and all that, when they would be accompanied, someone ahead of them would carry a fasces as kind of a symbol of their political authority. So that iconography in the U.S. Capitol is not inspired by Mussolini and Hitler. However, they're both drawing from the same iconography. So you can draw your conclusions which one is worse, but it's definitely a real thing. And the idea that Trump is a fascist and then Hillary is a communist, I think, is false. I think it's much closer to say she's definitely a fascist and he's like a wannabe fascist. It's very hard. He has all this rhetoric that, obviously he's disagreeable, but he hasn't done anything yet. I wouldn't doubt that he would do bad things, but until he has, it's very hard. If we measure the scales of their crimes, they just don't even compare because he hasn't had the ability to do that. That's, again, not an endorsement. It's just the way it is. Let's see. Yes, voting for the lesser of two evils is still either. Just voting is generally a waste of time. If every single person got out and waved their hands, we might be able to change the weather, but I'm not going to go waste my time. Should men going their own way and feminists be ideological enemies? Yes. Sorry guys, I'm scrolling through these comments and this is a weird. My roommates saw me online, they're looking at it now. Most people have small vocabularies. That's alright. Alright. So this is still working. I don't know what the time limits on these are. It's been over an hour. I've never made a video this long. 8 hours. I'm not going to stay on that long. I have to go to bed. Again, sorry for the pauses. This is annoying. John Clemenson's book, Karl Marx's Philosophy of Man, is also an excellent book. This is a comment by Ivan the Heathen on Marxism, specifically on the more humanistic young Marx. I'm not going to be on for 8 hours. God damn it. I didn't even know I was going to be on at all tonight. The Frankfurt School. It is so interesting how America, the new world, so many people here look to the old world for inspiration in all the wrong places, whether it's the British monarchy or the Prussian school system. I often wonder why that would be. Why would somebody like J.P. Morgan, who if anything, should revel in his own achievements and wealth and the glories of, an ascendant America, why would he want to be enthralled to Great Britain? And I really don't know. I could only speculate, but I would say, like, maybe it's a status thing, and all the new money in the United States, the new elite in the United States, who do they consider their social betters? And the only people they could think of would be like Queen Victoria and King George and the royalty of Europe, or the more ancient established societies in Europe. I really don't know. Yes, Ivan the Heathen, you should do a review on that book. Why do you read these good books and not make reviews about them? We can't all read all these books. What do you think of Milo Yiannopoulos? He's atrociously pro-circumcision. I mean, you can have the fetishes you want, but you should not advocate rights violations to see them brought to fruition. What should a libertarian do for this election? Vote locally for representatives that share our views, or evangelize. You should always evangelize. You just have to be smart about it. Vote when it makes sense. If there's any kind of strategic reason to do so, I'm not against it. Usually you don't have many options, but there's a few of the Ron Paul Republicans that are worth supporting. Not many, but there are some. My pet favorite is Justin Amash in Michigan, who I've met a few times, and I think he's the real deal. And if you have somebody like him or Thomas Massey, or there's a few others on the periphery, like maybe Chaffetz, a couple others, it's okay to vote for them, and it's okay to give them money. And if you have people in the local area, sure, why not? But don't waste your time if you're only going to be making a marginal selection for the lesser of two evils. Then there's just no point. Saudi Arabia and Israel want Assad removed from power because it will weaken Iran's influence. Yes, that's absolutely true, and they both give millions of dollars to Hillary Clinton, which is probably why it's her #1 policy goal, even though no Americans are calling for that. And America should be ambivalent about it because America has nothing to lose. Except a nuclear war with Russia. And this is the other thing I don't like about the office of the presidency. Hillary Clinton will have a Marine following her around with a lead costume that will protect her from fallout, and she has nuclear shelters and bomb shelters and air raid years of supply and a military dedicated to protecting her. And so if there is some kind of nuclear holocaust or a major war, she's shielded from the aftermath in a way the rest of us aren't. Now, not completely. She could still die, and she could still have nightmares or whatever else, but she won't be on the front line. She'll be insulated from the worst of her decisions, and that puts her in, that gives her very perverse incentives. Uh, so she gets millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and who knows, Turkey, Israel, and then she's perfectly happy to risk a Holocaust for everybody else. Will Lengthy suck a dick live? No. But if you want to know why I have a sore throat, it's because of secondhand smoke and smegma. Yeah, Russia has bomb shelter drills and we don't. What does that tell you? Have you read the open letter to the open-minded progressive? No. And part of me wants to say Putin is fear-mongering his own people because he always does that. He has his own domestic politics that he has to deal with, and the great other to him is the United States, and he uses that to great effect. But that doesn't make his threats idle either. You can call me Lengthy. I'm out of water too. Guys, this has been real, but I think I need to go to bed soon. A video on Rhodesia? No. They have excellent elephant hunting there. I don't know too much about Mussolini. He started off as a communist, and during World War I, he decided they were a little too radical and became a fascist, or invented fascism, or however you want to call it. At least that's the synopsis I was given. If the sanctions that are in place in Russia now continue, the Russian economy will collapse. Yeah, a big thing about Russia that a lot of people don't realize is that a huge part of the revenue of the state of Russia is based on royalties from oil production. Russia is one of the largest oil producers in the world, and basically their economy is so fucked up as a vestige of communism, but also, Russia had problems before communism that persisted since it ended as well. That it's been an export economy. People called it a superpower, but they weren't really manufacturing much. The value of what they produce there is not very high. And if you ever read Anthony Sutton's great works, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development, he talks about looking at the exports, comparing the exports of the United States with the exports of Russia. And the United States is exporting vehicles, computers, technological equipment, and food and things like that. But the Soviet Union was like their number one export was oil, and number two was like lumber, and number three was fur, like animal skins. It really is like a third world economy in a lot of senses. It's just a resource-based economy as opposed to finished goods or services. And the linchpin of that whole thing is oil. And the collapse of oil prices, which has largely been due to the development of fracking technology and the ability to extract hydrocarbons from dark shale formations, which I happen to know a lot about because that has been my entire job for about 8 years, has been to map dark shale formations in the United States. The United States produces more oil than Saudi Arabia. The United States is the #1 producer of hydrocarbons in the world right now, a position it hasn't had since probably the 60s. Um, and it's declined the price. Well, price is obviously a function of supply and demand, so that's not the only thing driving it, but that's a big part of it. And that's why you'll see if you watch Russia Today, they'll have anti-fracking documentaries. They'll have stuff, oh, oil spill this and that. And they never do documentaries about the pollution that happens in Russia or the destruction of the Aral Sea or Baku or the Caspian Sea or anything like that. But they're trying to discourage petroleum development in the United States because the low prices are just like they're strangling the Russian state. They're literally strangling it. And the reward system, the amount of plunder that Putin has to dispense to his allies is shrinking, which means the number of allies that he has is uh, is shrinking as well. The United States federal government, as evil as it is, has a much more robust tax base. It's not all based on oil. It's not all based on agriculture. It's not all based on tech or gambling or what. It has it's much wealthier and it's much broader base. So a drop in oil prices, even though it might affect the energy industry, isn't going to hurt the federal government very much, but it hurts the Russian government immensely. And that that internal pressure is obviously going to factor into their behavior. To what extent is impossible to say how much is from what, but yeah. I'm considering moving away from Sweden because of the right of self-defense. Yeah, move to America then. By all means, marry somebody. Ivan, I can't see the book that you recommended. Let's see. Great book about contemporary Russia. Nothing is true and everything is possible by Peter Pomerantsev. That's a great section. There's a great section on Russia Gold Digger Academies. Oh. 88 guns per 100 people. I think it's closer to 1-to-1 at this point. They don't really know. If Hillary gets elected, it'll definitely become 1-to-1. The gun stores are already filling up. Some of the guys in my gym are asking what stuff to get, and they're going to get it. I almost hope she tries gun control. It's like the one issue. It's the one issue. It's a line in the sand for tens of millions of people, and actually tens of millions of many, many legislators. So we'll see what happens. She might be hubristic enough to try it. I don't want her to, but do you really think people will rise up? I mean, that depends on so many circumstances. Under the right circumstances, some people will and some people won't. And depends what you mean by rise up as well. One thing we do know is Americans are more willing to die. They're more willing to kill too. They just, if they're Europeans, apparently largely will just allow themselves to be slaughtered, and Americans won't. I'm actually buying a pistol tomorrow. Good for you. Glock, Beretta, 1911. Don't get a Kimber. Save yourself a couple $1,000s. How much do guns cost? I'm in the UK. Huh. Well, it depends what kind of gun you get. You can get, shotguns, handguns, rifles. They all are priced differently. Like a good handgun is $400 or $500 at least. You can get a cheaper one for half that, but I wouldn't recommend it. A good shotgun you can get for $200-300. A good semi-automatic shotgun you're gonna look at more like $1,000. Bolt action rifles $500 or $600. Semi-automatic rifles can be quite a bit more expensive. You're looking at probably at least $900 for a cheap one. Not necessarily poor quality, but a cheaper one, but easily $1,200, $1,500. The most I've ever spent for a gun is $1,500. I've got a rifle that I spent that much for, and a handgun I spent that much for. And the cheapest I spent was $100, and that was on a Lee Enfield World War I bolt-action rifle. So that's the range. Revolver's better than semi-automatic. I don't agree with that. Well, they mass produce Enfields, but they're good rifles if you get one that's in good shape. I've got a Mauser that's in great shape. Springfields are good. Mosin Nagants, that's probably the most common, reliable rifle. You can get those for $150 at most gun stores. They're cheap, but they beat the Nazis. So $250, even less. I've seen them for $99. Sometimes you'll get the Chinese ones that are cheaper too. So if you go to a good gun store in the United States, you can find racks and racks of that shit. I bought what was your $1,500 handgun? It was a Kimber Super Carry Pro 1911 45. And that purchase has not justified itself yet. I don't watch gay porn. Cold Python. Here's something, all of you who are into guns but don't own any and don't know anything about it, I highly recommend the book, Boston's Gun Bible. That guy is a hardcore libertarian / borderline anarcho-capitalist. Very well read, very smart. Wrote one of the best critiques of the Constitution I've ever read, called the Hologram of Liberty. Started his own Free State project in Wyoming. I met him at PorcFest a couple years ago. Dude is the real deal. But he's a master at firearms. He knows all about them. And so that book covers what kind to get, how to train, how to take care of them, self-defense philosophy, how to where to shoot, when to shoot, what kind, what types, pros and cons. It's comprehensive. It's the gun Bible. And it's not just popular among libertarians. It's very popular in the gun-only audience. And I would highly recommend that anyone who would like to buy a gun but isn't familiar how, obviously talk to people who know. And I'm not an expert in this, but I have some experience. But I buy that book. And I'll summarize here. He says if you only buy one gun, it should be a rifle. Ultimately, they are the most versatile. You can hunt with them. You can use them for self-defense. They're effective at longer ranges and at closer ranges. They tend to be cheaper. They're more reliable. You can get a good bolt-action rifle that will never fail you for $100, $250. And I don't watch porn at all, straight or gay. Yeah, I don't know what the porn questions are about. I never got into porn. I'm sorry. It was too. It's the same reason I never got into watching professional sports. I don't take vicarious pleasure in watching other people do things. It just doesn't. If I see good athletes performing well, I can be impressed by their skill, but it doesn't make me feel like I've accomplished anything. If anything, it motivates me to go and work out. And watching other people engage in sex acts, it's like, fuck, I'm not engaging in the sex act. That's no fun. So, it's never worked with me. Revolvers have an edge in reliability over semi-autos. That's true. I know people who have been, like their lives aren't ruined by porn, but it becomes a problem when people can't, when they become so passive that they can't achieve orgasm without something else doing it for them. I think that really puts you in a bad position. I didn't make that choice to avoid it, but I see that as a problem. Also keeps my computers, pretty clean. There's some really nice revolvers out there. I have a GP100 that's 357 Magnum, and it's a joy to shoot. It's a great gun. They all have their place, man. Everyone should have a collection. You don't need just one. You need about a dozen. Are you opposed to Islamic immigration in America? No. Uh, this goes into the whole open borders, closed borders, and Kapistan government, which is which. Depends on the circumstances. It's out of print. That can't be right. It's been reprinted numerous times. But I tried to buy it. I tried to buy Boston's Gun Bible right after Obama got elected, and it was sold out. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's happening right now with the Clinton election, if not worse, since we have confirmation that she's going to try and take guns. I have 2 copies, but one of them's in another state. That is an excellent, excellent book, though, and it's actually fun to read. He's a very engaging writer, and a total badass. It was crazy. He would go to Porkfest and he would play frisbee, but he'd be wearing a sidearm and a knife. His most recent books are actually about going on safari to hunt big game. I have not bought any new swords recently. Honestly, I think I have as many swords as I need. I believe you, Ivan. Let me check. Jesus. Amazon.com. One of my favorite websites. As long as the Russians don't cyber attack this. Boston's Gun Bible. Jesus. Holy shit. Holy cow. $54 new and used. But the Kindle is free, or $3.99. Holy shit. The Boston's revised 2008 with the DC versus Heller, $168.99. Holy cow. That's insane. Wow. That's the book, though. It's got the Minutemen on the cover. Come to Porkfest. I'll loan you my copy, but Jesus. Or get the ebook. That's insane. No, I see it. Fuck. Well, the Kindle's $3.99. That's definitely worth it. It's worth it at $54.90. I would buy it at $54.07. I mean, I used it for the types of guns that I bought. I basically ended up buying all the guns that he recommends. I used it for the body armor that I bought. I used it for all kinds of stuff. It's really a great book. Honestly, there wasn't that much group sex at Porkfest. I mean, I was there with all the gay guys, and we hardly had any. I haven't given up on it. It's still pretty cool. If you've never gone, it's the coolest thing you've ever done, even if it's 20% not as cool as it was a year ago. Good question. Do I want to get married? I don't know, maybe. Depends. I feel like technology is going to just make all this really weird and irrelevant at some point. Either because we'll all be like destroyed by artificial intelligence, or linked into the collective consciousness, or sequencing our genes and cloning ourselves, or who knows. Yes, I want kids though. Have you read anything by Thomas P.M. Barnett? Not that I know of. But oftentimes I'll read a book and I'm not necessarily looking at the author. I didn't say that they would, I said that they might. I'm not qualified to speak on it. Consenting adults can get married if they want. Whatever. People don't want to build them a cake or officiate the wedding, that's fine too. I have not read any of Paul Krugman's books. I don't have any plans to write any books, and if I did, they would not be what you're thinking they would be about. No. I have never read Money Bank Credit Economic Settles. If dogs want to get married, that's their business. I mean, are dogs consenting adults, though? They die when they're like 12. Unclear if they're cognitively capable of consent also. Alright guys, I'm going to do a last call on questions. I'm going to wait about 1 minute, and then I'm going to answer those questions, and then I'm going to go to bed. What's my view on race realism? I have a video, The Political Implications of Race Realism. You can watch it there. What's my max deadlift? I'm embarrassed to say at this point. If it's a bar, I can do 335. If it's the trap bar, I can do 365 for 4 sets, 4 to 6 reps. It's a work in progress. I've been spending a lot of time losing weight and in a calorie deficit, so I'm not really getting stronger much of the time, but I'm in a bulk right now, and it's going up basically week by week. I'd like to get over 400 pounds in the next maybe 3 months, but we'll see. Do I drink? No, never. I've never had a drop of alcohol in my life. I don't know when my next stream will be. I will not stay online if you pay me $1. You don't even have a way to pay me $1. Oh shit, went too far back. Damn it. These comments are really annoying. It's not a question. My max bench, 205 for 4 sets with a bar, and 200 with dumbbells. And I can do more with dumbbells, I just don't have access to anything that are more than 200 pounds. That's for horizontal bench, a little bit less for incline bench. I don't do any drugs. I think vegetarianism is dubious dietarily and ethically. Joe Rogan did an excellent ethical critique of vegetarianism. I think it can be healthy to a point, but I'm not really a big fan. I've never tried alcohol because I don't believe in impairing my own judgment, and never have. Never had any appeal, never liked the smell. Figured I'd save money and time and whatever. It's been a blessing, really. I've never really had even the remotest desire to try alcohol. How many ANCAPs exist? It's in the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. It is important. Who is my biggest idol? Probably Vercingetorix. Those swords are doing fine sitting in my closet. There's a trail of murders behind the Clintons. Some of them are political opponents. Some of them are people who are just inconvenient for them. I don't think they're capable of murdering everybody who ever wronged them, but at a certain level I think they do, and they can, and they have. Oklahoma City is very complicated. I don't know exactly what happened. The government either had forewarning or did it themselves. It's possible that it was provocateur. It's possible that independent organizations did it and the government had patsies with them. We don't really know. There's a couple good books on it, and actually, when I did work in Oklahoma City, some subscribers took me on a tour to the memorial, which is quite interesting. Joe Rogan, just type Joe Rogan debunks vegetarianism. It's a video. It's about 20 minutes long. It happened in the last couple months, so it's not that old, but it's quite good. He's interviewing one of the paleo people, not Mark Sissons or Wolf, but somebody lesser known that I'd never heard of before. But it's quite good. Keto sounds interesting, but I'm not a dietitian, so I don't really have an informed opinion about it. And that's it. Well, thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. I don't know when I'll do it again. Next time I might be talking with someone else, so we'll see. But I hope you all have a good night.